Spyro 3 Year of the Dragon is what some consider to be the last good Spyro game, and while I'm not sure if I agree with that sentiment just yet, I can clearly see where they're coming from. This was the last Spyro game produced by Insomniac before they moved on to work on other things, stating they just couldn't do anything more with his character. And for the final game by Insomniac, they did a pretty great job. I'm not even going to leave you with a cliche cliffhanger for this review because I really love this game. It's filled to the brim with new content that surprisingly does a lot to diversify the Spyro universe, and overall it's just fun to play. That's not to say the game is without a single flaw though, and is better than any Spyro game to date, because maybe it isn't. Or is it? Well, let's begin with the story. The adventure begins with Spyro and his other dragon elders, as well as Hunter for some reason, taking a nap in the middle of an open field. Some creatures called Rhinox and a magical rabbit named Bianca, who serves the sorceress, invade the dragon realms and steal all the dragon eggs with virtually no trouble at all. That is until Bianca steps on Hunter's tail and all the dragons and Hunter wake up. Fortunately for the rabbit girl, Hunter trips on a rock before grabbing her, and just like that, there's a problem for Spyro to solve. So Spyro, Sparks, and Hunter jump through these holes into the Forgotten Realms, a land once inhabited by dragons until it was eventually abandoned and forgotten. Like always, Spyro must retrieve all the MacGuffins, lead a rebellion, and stop the evil sorceress's rule of the realms. And over the course of the game, it's revealed the sorceress does not merely want to capture and keep these dragon eggs in the Forgotten Realms, but rather she wants to use the baby dragons and their wings to concoct a spell that can grant her immortality. At this point, Bianca turns against the sorceress, and that's about all I'll say about the plot now. While it's not as goofy as Ripto's Rage, I kind of like this more serious tone. Before, Ripto just wanted to conquer all of Avalard, not to kill everyone, but here the sorceress wants to essentially murder babies, which is pretty evil if you ask me. But that doesn't necessarily make her a better villain. The sorceress lacks a lot of character development and dark undertones that Ripto had and showed many times. Ripto felt generally more diabolical despite his intentions not being as fierce. The problem with the sorceress is that the game tells you she is evil by just her words alone, whereas Ripto actively showed he was evil and felt like a more dynamic character. He actually interacted with Spyro throughout the second game, whereas the sorceress just sits on her throne throughout the majority of Spyro 3. Sure, you could say Bianca is kind of the main antagonist too, but she eventually becomes your ally and is more misguided than villainous. Truth be told, I like Bianca's character a lot more than anyone else's in this title. She has more moments where you get to see her as a dynamic character who is thinking about and regretting her past evil actions. Aside from those two, the characters in Spyro 3 are mostly flat and static. Spyro is the same as he always was, and so are Sparks and Hunter. And the new characters, which I'll get into later, are somewhat bland. The only significant development they have are being rebellious individuals who hate both Moneybags and the sorceress. Oh yeah, and Moneybags is just as selfish as he ever was. If I do have to applaud the story for anything, it's once again the writing and voice acting. The way all of the actors portray their characters is dang near perfect. I especially love Bianca's performance and her lines.
Spyro, this is serious now. The sorceress is planning a trap for you, and if she catches you... Believe me, you don't want to know what she's gonna do.
I can't really describe it that well, but everything here just works and flows together amazingly. There is not one voice performance that I would deem as cringeworthy or bad here. I think they're all pretty great. The same can be said for the graphical presentation as well. When compared to the last two games, everything has basically been improved. The texture work is better with less jagged level geometry, the models look slightly better, and all the visuals are really colorful and detailed. And like the last game, all the set pieces and level themes are extremely varied. To name just a few, there are islands filled with crystals and a speedway level based on a bee's world filled with honey and numerous hives. I would even go as far to say that these levels and their visual styles are my favorite in the entire Spyro series. No theme or level ever overstays their welcome. Not once did I want to leave a world because it felt boring or uninteresting. Every part of this visual presentation just oozes charm and personality. Much like the last last two games, enemies are also really varied and actually interact with you. In the last game, you fought some of the peoples of Avalar, and in Spyro 1, you were fighting mostly Norks, but in Spyro 3, you're combating against the Rhinoc army. Although it might sound a bit limiting to only fight these rhino-themed enemies, it somehow isn't. Each Rhinoc is always dressed in some different attire, which adds variation and immerses the player in the revolution against the Rhinoc army. It also adds a lot of depth to the world, as you, the player, actually feel like you have a part in this war between the Rhinocs and the rebellion. Even though the world building is not as incredible or atmospheric as Avalar was, I still appreciate what the Forgotten Realms brought to the table in terms of enemies and visual themes. Not to mention, the soundtrack is wonderful. This time around, Stuart Copeland was joined by Ryan Beveridge. From my understanding, Copeland and Beveridge both individually contributed to Spyro 3's soundtrack, and if you listen to the soundtrack with Copeland's past work in the back of your head, you can clearly determine which tracks each composer wrote. It seems as if songs like Cloud Spires were composed by Copeland, while songs like Seashell Shores were composed by Beveridge. And I have to say, this is probably Copeland's best work for the Spyro series yet. Every track is so catchy and upbeat, it's a joy to listen to. Once again, the soundtrack is primarily used for atmospheric purposes, which is completely fine, but unlike Spyro 1, each track is pretty memorable. So anyways, how about the star attraction, the gameplay? Well, it's very similar to the past installments. It's more of a mix between Spyro 1 and 2 more than anything. The main objective is simple: collect a bunch of gems and dragon eggs and defeat the sorceress. Progression in this title is relatively straightforward. Orbs have been totally removed, thank heavens, and instead you get to the sorceress by defeating the boss in every world. To do so, you'll need to free a rebel fighter and make your way through 4 levels to free 4 villagers that power a vehicle that transports you to the boss. So this way, no levels, with the exception of the speedway levels, are optional. You have to finish every stage to reach the boss, which you could see as a limitation because you were more free to do whatever level you chose in Spyro 1, but I didn't mind this at all. Sure, it makes Spyro 3 a bit more linear, but the levels are pretty enjoyable to go through and explore in. Each level is significantly larger than the ones from the past games and are expertly crafted. The developers certainly learned how to squeeze a lot of content into a small space and make it seem massive. There are buildings and structures you can jump to, places to glide from, and so many off-the-beaten-path secrets. The main levels in Spyro 3 are simply a joy to go through, and the addition of locked portals that can only be accessed by dragon eggs actually incentivizes you to explore and do the returning secondary missions in each world. And unlike the second game, the gems feel like they have value. They aren't just used for lazy roadblocks by moneybags, but rather you need them to free these rebel fighters. This new usage compels you to collect these gems because these rebel animals are pretty fun to play as. And there are quite a few of them too, so you're always collecting gems to see what animal you get to play as next. Not only that, but these animal buddies spice up the level design and gameplay from the typical gliding, fire-breathing dragon to something entirely different. The first rebel animal you rescue is Sheila the kangaroo, whose levels are pretty straightforward. You essentially just go from point A to point B and collect some dragon eggs. She controls exactly as you would think a kangaroo would control like. The only thing is you don't have total control of where she goes or how far she moves, since she hops around instead of walking. This does lead to some awkward moments on the ground, but it's not that bad. She can also double jump in the air and jump extra high if you press the X button right as you touch the ground. The one problem I have with her movement in the air is that it's so stiff that it makes it hard for me to control where she's going. And can I just say, I really dislike the Firefly escort mission in Spooky Swamp, where you have to make sure these creatures don't get hit by obstacles because they'll explode if they do. It's not terrible, it's just tedious and annoying. But the good thing about her and the majority of the rebels is that their levels only last for a world and are short. So if you are ever bored of a character, you can always anticipate someone new in the next world. Like Sergeant Bird, who is the captive rebel fighter in the Midday Gardens. Sergeant Bird's levels are, well, okay. They aren't as fun as Sheila's stages because Sergeant Bird kind of controls strangely at first. His movement on the ground is somewhat slow, and his movement in the air is also slow. And the fact that he can shoot missiles out of rocket launchers on his wings is both awesome and awkward. I could never get the aiming of these missiles down no matter how hard I tried, but I really don't mind his levels either. However, fighting the cat witches with the somewhat clunky aiming is not fun in the slightest. That's sort of the reoccurring issue with most of these rebel animals. There's always that one level for each of them that I cannot stand, and I cannot think of a better rebel animal this applies to more than Bentley. See, Bentley isn't all bad. I actually like how his levels are designed and how he controls. Not to mention I love his voice acting and general character development as a lovable brute. Sure, he does move really slow, but I feel the level design compensates for his lack of speed. Stages are short, so I never really had trouble with any of them, except for the infamous one. Boxing with Bentley. Fighting this damn Yeti has to be the most frustrating and infuriating thing in any of the original Spyro games. To win, you have to memorize your opponent's attack patterns to a T. Button mashing and careless dodging will get you nowhere in this fight. Not to mention the controls are wonky and so difficult to master. It took me more than 20 minutes to beat this one minigame, and missions like these bog down the otherwise quick pacing of Spyro 3. This very minigame is the reason why so many people despise this character, and I can't say I blame them. Bentley is the least enjoyable character to play out of the bunch. Anyways, the last rebel fighter you free is Agent 9, who plays a lot like Mega Man Volnut from the Mega Man Legends series. He controls pretty well and gets to shoot at enemies with ease. It's pretty fun. Agent 9 is one of the few buddies that I don't have many complaints or praises about. You're a monkey that shoots lasers at Rhinox in generic levels. I would even go as far to say that I enjoyed these levels the most because I was sort of having dumb, brainless fun running around and shooting things. Technically, that's the last of the rebel fighters, but you can also play as Hunter in the Speedway levels. And to do so, you have to complete the Speedway level by racing someone and doing a time attack, then find Hunter somewhere in that Speedway level. When you find him, you usually have to do some sort of challenge like escaping a sheep saucer on a motorboat or going through the smoke rings of another broken flying saucer. These missions are pretty fun, and it's always a nice treat to play as someone other than Spyro. You only get a measly dragon egg from it, so they aren't entirely worthwhile. The last other character you can play as is Sparks, Spyro's life bar. Sparks actually has a larger role in this title than in any Spyro game before. You can play as Sparks after defeating the bosses in the 4 realms, and all of his levels are top-down shooters, which are okay. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of this gameplay style, so I personally didn't find them to be too entertaining. They are pretty short though, so they never got on my nerves, but I don't think I would ever come back to them just for fun. However, these levels are worth completing since they don't just give you gems and dragon eggs, but they power up Sparks. Finishing certain levels will increase Sparks' hit points, increase his range of collecting gems, and allow him to use the Gem Finder ability, which he had from the get-go in Ripto's Rage. Apart from the Gem Finder, everything Spyro could do at the end of Ripto's Rage, he can do here. He can still swim, headbash, and climb up walls, so there's no need to learn new things from moneybags, which is wonderful. It's great when a game assumes you've already played the last one and doesn't make you relearn things you already know. Plus, this makes the first levels in Spyro 3 more dynamic. Since you already have these abilities that expanded the level design in the previous game, the level design can now just be fully expanded in the beginning of the sequel. Additionally, it allows the developers to make more challenging levels while still maintaining a balance of somewhere in between really hard and really easy. Something else worth mentioning here are the new and improved missions, which are now sectioned off from the main levels and in separate areas. This time around, I actually liked playing through these missions for a couple of reasons. They now feel more worthwhile as the rewards, the dragon eggs, have immediate value. Plus, they're pretty fun and short. Not only that, but each mission is different enough from the rest where next to none feel boring. Also, the addition of power-ups in these missions only make them more entertaining. Sometimes you'll be skateboarding and doing tricks, and other times you'll be creating a sun out of smaller balls of fire. That being said, some missions are pretty insufferable, like the water tunnel minigames and the tank battles in the Haunted Tomb. But overall, the diversity combined with a worthwhile reward makes these missions a heck of a lot better than the ones in Spyro 2. Unfortunately, the bosses in Spyro 3, in my opinion, are a lot lot less challenging and engaging than Gulp and Crush in Spyro 2. The bosses have almost no build-up and virtually no personality to them. They just feel like they're there for the sake of having them. Sure, the way they implement the rebel animals is unique and cool to see, but they just felt bland and very predictable. If I do have to compliment them on anything though, I would say their designs are creepy but distinct, which is cool. Now, we finally get to the ending of Spyro 3, and spoiler alert, skip to the time on screen if you care about preserving the mystery of how the tale of an evil queen wanting immortality ends. So you collect a bunch of dragon eggs, defeat all the bosses, and you finally face off against the sorceress. All you mainly have to do is get the sorceress to knock down these cannon machines or vehicles in the air and shoot her until her health bar dwindles down. It's an easy fight and it's somewhat anticlimactic. Maybe this is just because I didn't like her character as much as Ripto's, but I couldn't find any enjoyment out of this final fight. It's just boring. But once the evil sorceress dies, presumably, freedom is spread all across the Forgotten Realms, and Spyro encounters Bianca and Hunter, kissing and falling in love. So riddle me this, how do a cheetah and a bunny, well anyways, Spyro laments the loss of Hunter to his newly found romantic partner, and the game ends. That is, unless you don't go after the 149 dragon eggs and 15,000 gems, which allow you to see the game's true ending and secret final boss. So yeah, somehow the sorceress survived her last defeat, so Spyro has to once again fight her in her flying saucer. This refight is not very interesting, but at least it's a bit more unique than the last fight. Nevertheless, once Spyro finally murders the sorceress, 2 new baby dragons hatch, and just like that, the original Spyro series has come to a close. Unfortunately, the ending is pretty disappointing, and the reward for completing everything is a lot worse than the ones in Spyro 1 and 2. There isn't a great world to explore or anything along those lines. You just fight the sorceress again and do some miscellaneous missions. Sure, you could argue this reward for fully completing the game is a lot more enjoyable than Nasty's loot, but I personally think this level is the weakest of the bunch. From my perspective, it's simply not worth your time to fully complete this title. All in all though, I enjoyed Spyro 3 Year of the Dragon. The level design and the presentation are the best in the series as of this game. Despite the story not being as compelling as Ripto's rages and the sorceress not living up to the greatness of Ripto's villainy, I still appreciate all the character development and lighthearted dialogue with dark undertones. The gameplay here is some of the most entertaining in the series. Also, exploration and collecting are encouraged here, unlike Ripto's rage. Plus, the missions are less annoying, and although progression is more linear, I still like the simplicity to it. Overall, I like Year of the Dragon the most out of all the 3 Spyro games. I would highly recommend that if you're going to play any Spyro game, play this one first. It's fun and easy to pick up and play, but as always, if you disagree or agree with me, let me know in the comment section below. And thank you so much for watching and take care. Have a wonderful day and goodbye.